Well, hello there, you amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. I hope you are all well. You're looking absolutely amazing. I'm going to get straight into the meat and potatoes, as I don't want to take up any of your 4th of July weekend. Not more than we have to anyway. But look, we are digging back into the Idaho 4 case because obviously the media are having a little bit of a field day in the aftermath of Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty to the crimes. So in the eyes of the law, he is of course guilty. So there is currently no fear of being sued or anything like that. So they've gone balls deep in hammering the living crap out of him. And look, if he genuinely is guilty of this crime, and it isn't just that he has pleaded guilty because he was perhaps, well, maybe he just felt that he had no alternative, whether it was to protect his family, whether it was just to protect his own life because he didn't fancy being shot. Go figure. Someone would plead guilty because they don't want to be executed. Like that's not been heard of. But look, I know it upsets some people to contemplate that, but it is what it is. And look, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the perfect crime. Because if Bryan Kohberger, and we are going to treat this video as if Bryan Kohberger is guilty, because at the end of the day, he has pled guilty to it. So we have to consider at least the fact that he is the person who did it. So look, this is how media are playing this. Go away. Don't worry, I'm talking to an animal that is a flying variety, not anything brilliant. But how Bryan Kohberger almost got away with the perfect crime. Really? Let's see. So it says, Robin Dreeke, former chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program, told Daily Mail that Kohberger, 30, would have gotten away with the 2022 stabbings in Moscow, Idaho, had he not forgotten to wipe his DNA from a knife sheath. And look, we will talk about this in a second, but let's just see what they say. Let's hear them out. Dreeke offered a fascinating insight into why he thinks Kohberger made the mistake. The notorious murders he wished to emulate all predated DNA technology. Again, don't worry, we'll stick a pin in all this. Kohberger, who admitted killing Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin, that actually says Xana Knoble, at a plea deal hearing in Boise Wednesday, planned and executed most of the bloodbath with the terrifying precision and coldness, Dreeke said. But he slept up because he had a dated perception of the forensics capabilities of investigators. Now, you could argue that he just didn't know how willing the certain three-letter agency would go in order to find the killer. And then we're talking about, do the ends justify the means? But I think it would be unfair to say that a student in current criminology education would not understand DNA capabilities of today. I think that that's somewhat of a stretch, because what he's trying to say is that Bryan Kohberger wouldn't have understood that by touching a knife sheath with your bare hand, which he must have done because of the position of it from a start. So that shows you if that had been found somewhere else, you could say that Bryan Kohberger might have been a shedder and it was just unlucky. But the fact that it was found on the button snap is trying to simulate the touching and utilization of that sheath without protecting the sheath from your DNA. So that's not an oversight. Well, it is, isn't it? It's a fucking massive oversight. He simply didn't know about potential of touch DNA being on that sheath and the law enforcement folks being able to extract it. Really? Is that what we're saying? Are we genuinely going down the route of saying that Bryan Kohberger didn't know that there was a potential that if he handled the knife sheath with his bare hands, there isn't a potential for transferal of DNA? That's what we're saying. Let me know down below if you believe that. Dreeke told Daily Mail he may not have been aware that his father was in the database that outed him. Those were the critical errors. Kohberger was a criminology student at Washington State University who searched for notorious killer Ted Bundy online. Completely irrelevant because he was a criminology student. It would have been more bizarre, and I've said this in the past, if he had never searched Ted Bundy online. And what I will also say here, with respect of his father being in a database, we've been led to believe that Bryan Kohberger himself had placed himself into a database as he would look to search up his ancestry. I think he had, or it had been noted that he had a specific interest in his Italian roots. Again, we don't know how accurate that is, but that is what had been said previously by someone who knew Bryan Kohberger. Bundy killed at least 20 women and girls between 1974 and 78 and was caught thanks to a lucky break and rudimentary forensic testing on hairs found in his Volkswagen Beetle. So we're now kind of shooting ourselves in the foot because we're saying that he's someone who looked up Ted Bundy online, he studied Ted Bundy, he knew about Ted Bundy. Oh, but he must have overlooked that Ted Bundy, his undoing was around forensics testing and DNA. Drake said that in other respects, Kohberger was the perfect killing machine and offered a blood-curdling motive for the slaughter. He's a psychopath, Drake explained, noting that he is not a clinical psychologist, so he cannot formally diagnose Kohberger. So no, again, this is complete speculation, but reiterated that the killer fits the profile. Psychopathy is a complex personality disorder marked by several traits, most notably a lack of empathy and poor behavioral controls. Kohberger has zero empathy. He's devoid of emotion, he said. People ask if he is guilty. Do I think he did it? Yes. But guilt is an emotion. He does not have emotions. Now, one thing I will say is Bryan Kohberger didn't appear too emotional in his plea hearing. He didn't. I will say that. But is that indicative of psychopathy? I'm not an expert, so I can't tell you. People think too hard about what he's thinking. They were analysing his court appearance, saying he was trying to control his emotions. There's nothing to control. He doesn't have emotions. But again, this is your speculation. He's cold-blooded killer looking for a rush. He believes that Kohberger would 100% kill again had he not been arrested over the slayings because of the emotional response that murder provides him. But you're saying he lacks emotions. He doesn't have any emotions. He literally says he doesn't have emotions, and then he would kill again because of the emotional response that murder provides him. Although Drake only has his theory and conjecture, the criminal behavior expert believes Kohberger's decision to kill Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Anna Knodel, they've gone for Knoble again, and Ethan Chapin had little to do with them. I think it had nothing to do with the girls. It was about him. He said of the 5 women living in the off-campus house in Moscow, northern Idaho, Kohberger studied how to do this for a long time. He was OCD in his methodology. Again, let's stick a pin in that. And I think he set out to commit the perfect crime. Drake believes he targeted the home because it was in a location that he perceived as safe. Again, we'll stick a pin in that. The shared residence was a high-traffic home that allowed him to hide in plain sight and go undetected. He did precisely what you do if you studied this, but you haven't done it before, he added. The former FBI agent says that his possible Kohberger would still be at large today had he not left DNA on the knife sheath found at the crime scene. Investigators linked Kohberger to the killings after collecting DNA samples from the garbage outside his parents' Pennsylvania home. But still, again, we're questioning what came first, the chicken or the egg. Do you know what I mean? It's a fucking odd one, mate. It's an odd one, isn't it? Because he got his father's DNA. So, you know, you knew that who you was looking for. You was looking for Bryan Kohberger. You went to his father's to extract the DNA and then matched the DNAs together. They determined DNA left on the Q-tip at the residence belonged to the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath. Dreek notes the investigators may have eventually tied Kohberger to the case after looking into his car, which was seen in Moscow the night of the killings and 23 times prior, but that scenario is much less probable. Why is it? Why is that much less probable? We're talking about the early hours of the morning. This car, what they're claiming is, suspect vehicle 1, Bryan Kohberger's car, is literally driving around and getting caught on multiple cameras. They also seemingly decide that it's a white Hyundai Elantra, so you've tied it down to a white Hyundai Elantra. You also recognise that it doesn't have a front number plate, so you're looking for a white Hyundai Elantra of a specific year radius without a front number plate that is caught on multiple cameras in the area of this crime. And then it leads you down the phone route, where you then start looking at the phones. You do your dragnet on the phones. So, again, I don't see where we go from, the perfect crime. And we'll tie this up in a bow in a second. But regardless, the former FBI agent is confident that had he not been caught, Kohberger would have continued to kill. Why wouldn't he? He didn't kill out of vengeance towards the students. He killed for himself and liked it. Dreek told Daily Mail he believes the murderer would have learned from the Idaho kill, studying what he did correctly and his mistakes, and would do it again. Dreek further believes Kohberger would have chosen a similar environment, a shared home or vulnerable location where he could move in and out unobserved. Was this a vulnerable location, and what made it vulnerable? Bearing in mind that this was a student digs with multiple people. It was renowned for having parties that would have even more of an abundance of people. There was multiple cars outside it. Some of the people who would go into this property were quite large and athletic individuals, and it was surrounded by fucking cameras all over it. So I don't understand how you could class it as vulnerable. And on the night that he chose to go into this house, it just happened to be a football night, which would have potentially made this an even bigger risk. He would use a knife to a game because it worked. He added killing someone with a knife is personal, up close, and causes an emotional response. Kohberger was looking for an emotional response. Serial killers often take trophies, a memory, an imprint of the fantasy they tried to live out. In this case, his selfie was the only trophy. That's not a lot to remember it by, so he most certainly would have done it again. Kohberger on Wednesday pleaded guilty to the quadruple stabbing of Mogan, Consalves, Knodel, and Chapin. Got it right there in November 2022. The controversial plea bargain spared him the death penalty and will instead see him serve 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The deal also included a clause that Kohberger cannot ever appeal his conviction. He will be sentenced later this month and will have the chance to speak. But Kohberger will not be forced to address the court, meaning his true motive may never be known. So we will get to see if he actually says something. Let's see if he does. Maybe that will help us to understand where we are and how we arrived at this position. But with respect of Bryan Kohberger and the perfect crime, in order to fully understand and appreciate that Bryan Kohberger is the person who did this crime, then you have to look at it right from the start. We have spoken about this. I spoke about this with JB Gunner, who I'll be going live with again tomorrow. And it was a case of, if Bryan Kohberger did it, he actively goes online and purchases a K-bar knife sheath, a sharpener, and everything else that he needs online. So he's using a credit or debit card. He's then got everything. He has that delivered to him on the night of the crime, where he chooses a place that he's obviously frequenting this area. So he's already tied into this area on these multiple occasions. He's driving his own car. He takes his own phone. There is no way that he tries to hide his location apart from turning the phone off, which again is problematic because he's left the house with the phone in the first place. And then he's turned the phone back on. Why not just leave your phone at home on fucking YouTube watching me or something. Do you know what I mean? So he does all these things, and like I say, he drives his own car. He drives his own car to the property, not close by, and runs in, bearing in mind that he's fit as well, so he would have had the ability to do that. And not only does he drive to the property, but before he goes to the property, he drives round the property and round other streets that are allowing him to get caught on camera. And then in the aftermath of it, not to mention he's left a witness, he then drives off like a bat out of hell and apparently nearly runs someone down, which ultimately would bring attention to this white car and potentially the driver. So this absolutely wasn't the perfect crime, that it was just the fact that he left a knife sheath with his DNA on it. Because again, not only did he buy all these things, but he clearly handled all of these things without taking any form of precaution to stop his DNA from being transferred onto them, indicated by the fact that the DNA was apparently found on the knife sheath, which wasn't accidental handling, it wasn't transfer from something else, it was directly from when the snap on the sheath was activated. So tell me, this wasn't the perfect crime. This was literally every single mistake someone could have made, he made. That's what we're saying. And he was a PhD student, a criminology student, speciality in cloud-based forensics. And he literally made every single mistake that he could have made. He is literally, if he genuinely is guilty of this crime, then he is quite literally the most stupid mass murderer ever to walk the planet. Let me know down below what you think, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Mwah.